Mr. Russo, how are you over there?
Very well.
Are you ready to go? Okay, welcome to the Newton Town Council regular meeting of April 14th, 2025. If we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Terry, can we have a roll call? Mr. Coos?
Here.
Mr. Dixon?
Here.
Mrs. Diglio?
Here.
Mrs. Teets? Here. Mayor LaFois? Here. In accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, notice of this regular meeting was given to the two newspapers of record and posted on the official bulletin board on January 3rd, 2025. Item 4 on the agenda is the approval of the March 24th, 2025 regular meeting minutes. Any additional discussion or changes to the minutes?
No.
Seeing none, I need a motion to approve.
I will make a motion to approve the minutes of March 24th, 2025, regular meeting.
And I will second.
I have a motion to approve by Councilwoman Diglio and a second by Councilwoman Teets. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Coos?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mrs. Diglio?
Yes.
Mrs. Teets?
Yes,
Mayor LaFois?
Yes. Item 5 is open to the public. At this point in the meeting, the town council welcomes comments from any member of the public on any topic. To help facilitate an orderly meeting and to permit the opportunity for anyone who wishes to be heard, speakers are asked to take one turn at the microphone, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. The clerk will keep time. If reading from a prepared statement, please provide a copy and email a copy to the clerk's office after making your comments so that it may be properly reflected in the minutes. Council may choose to comment after the entire public portion has concluded. We'll start with those that are present in person. If you have any comments, please identify yourself and spell your last name for the record. Anyone here? All right, Mr. Russo, seeing none, do we have anybody attending virtually on Zoom that would like to make a comment at this time?
Anybody online wishing to comment, just use the raise hand feature.
We have a healthy attendance online tonight. That's great.
No hand.
All right, seeing none, we will move on. There will be another opportunity for the public to comment later in the agenda. All right, so we'll move on to item 6, council and manager reports. Mr. Russo, you want to review the proclamations we have for this month?
Sure. For the proclamations, we have Child Abuse Prevention Month. There's one for National Donate Life Month. And finally, there's one for National Volunteer Week, April 20 through April 26th. Also want to mention municipal offices are closed this Friday for Good Friday. Wish everyone happy Passover and happy Easter, and an early happy birthday to Sandy, who's celebrating this weekend. That's all.
Thank you. Councilmember Coos,
Nothing at this time.
Councilwoman Diglio.
Yes, this past week I attended the awards, the Sussex County Chamber Awards, and the town of Newton was awarded the Chairman's Award, which is a very prestigious award. And I want to thank Tom and our staff, the police, DPW, because it literally pays honor to all of us that work in this town and for the betterment of the community. So I just want to say thank you to everyone. Especially Tom, for all your efforts.
That's great. All right, Councilwoman Teets.
just a couple of things, despite the unexpected snowstorm on Saturday morning. They did successfully complete an indoor Easter egg hunt at the high school gym. And I really don't know how many children were there, but it seemed like a lot. It seemed like plenty for the gym area. And I think everyone had a pretty good time. Matt and I didn't find a golden ticket. So, but we got to do some arts and crafts and talk to some people. So that was fun. Lots of pictures with the Easter Bunny.
Nice.
So it was a really good event. And thanks to the DPW for waking me up nice and early on Saturday morning, because I was awake and I thought I was dreaming when I heard the snow plow and I was very confused. But as always, they got the roads cleared nice and early. And then sorry, going through real quickly. I think that is all I have at this point. Thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Dixon.
Yeah, I'll just echo that sentiment on, for the Easter egg hunt. It was, you know, they had to pivot quickly with the, inclement weather, but, I think they did well, went off without a hitch. Danielle and Barbara did a great job as always, so did all the volunteers. So just, it was a great job. That's all I have.
Thank you. So a couple of announcements, just with reference to our proclamations for this month. I want to thank, Tom's office and the council for recognizing the 3 proclamations. Child Abuse Prevention Month, as you know, I work in the issue of domestic violence. The causes seem to go hand in hand, so anything that we can do to raise awareness on the plight of our youngest members of the community that are impacted by this issue and raise awareness, I think is always a good opportunity. National Donate Life Month is April annually, also a very important cause. When my brother passed, he was a donor, unbeknownst to us, actually. We didn't find that out until at the hospital when he had passed. And it was amazing to learn the number of people that he was able to help because he was a donor. I had the opportunity to go down and visit the New Jersey Sharing Network office where his name is etched in glass. And this is something that you can do to become a donor. You can do very easily when you renew your license or go into motor vehicle and make that designation. But it's amazing with modern medical technology, the impact that you can make on others, you know, at your passing. So thank you for that proclamation as well. And then National Volunteer Week, you know, none of the work that gets done in most organizations, certainly nonprofit organizations, but even here at the municipal level, it doesn't get done without our wonderful volunteers, from our fire department to our first aid squad to the boards and commissions. The council has been meeting since 5:30 with people that are interested in volunteering for the town of Newton, and it's refreshing to hear their reason why and how they want to make a difference and what they want to do for their community. So thank you to everyone that is volunteering in their church, nonprofit organizations, in the places that they work, in their community. And I said, our first responders, I know we have leadership from our police department here in attendance tonight, who know firsthand the wonderful work that is done by our first responders in a volunteer capacity that supports their work minute by minute and day by day. So thank you for those 3 proclamations. Thank you to Deputy Mayor Dixon and Councilwoman Teets for attending the indoor Easter egg hunt this year. I'm sorry I was out of town and missed it, but I loved seeing the pictures, and thank you both for being there. Thank you to Danielle, the Recreation Department and the Recreation Committee, who was so engaged, and I know did a really great job to make that event special again. And thank you to Newton High School for hosting us. And Michelle, which group came out?
Yeah, so thank you. The Newton High School field hockey team
Great.
was there, yes, and quite a few of them, and very, very engaging, so it was good.
Wonderful. As Councilwoman Diglio mentioned, last week we did have the Sussex County Annual Chamber Awards luncheon. So there are 15 categories. Of the 15 categories, I think we had Newton businesses or affiliates nominated in each of the categories. And we had 8 winners who either have businesses in the town of Newton or affiliated with the town of Newton. So if you'll just indulge me for a minute, we had Katie's House, who was the winner of the Quality in Living Award, a wonderful nonprofit here located right down the street. The Rising Star Award went to Andrea Riker from Ginny's House, also located in town. The Chamber Champion Award was the County of Sussex, specifically the Division of Facilities Management. As we know, the county's offices are located here as well. Business Person of the Year, Jennifer Cable, President of Thor Labs, also located in town. The Business Innovation Award went to Sussex County Community College, their public safety training program specifically. Customer Service Award, Planet Networks, went to Planet Networks. The David C. Herzenberger Award went to Zoo Fall Health, also nominated by the town of Newton, a wonderful service here. And then, of course, as Sandy said, the Chairman's Award went to the town of Newton en masse in general, which is the highest award of the day, and really is a comprehensive recognition of the management of the town, all of the services, departments, being business friendly, the contributions that are made to the county, from the town, contributions in terms of the businesses, the culture, the live, work, play that happens here and how that contributes to the overall, quality of life and success to the county. So congratulations, Tom, and to the team for getting that award, and to everybody that attended the luncheon last week. Deputy Mayor and I do have a planning board meeting on Wednesday evening, so nothing to report at this time, but we will at the next meeting. Wanted to also recognize that the Penny Rose Coffee Shop on Spring Street has opened. I think they're in their third week of business, and we've all heard really good feedback. I've attended. It's a cute store. I know members of the staff have been there as well because they've been helping to promote on social media. So go in and say hi to that team. Also happy to see that soon our Hometown Hero banners, which is a program that was started last year, where individuals, families, and businesses were able to make a contribution to sponsor a banner to honor a friend or family or acquaintance of someone that was in the military or served. I understand that there were 12 new banners that were sponsored for this year. So those banners, 13 new banners, great. So those are going to be going up soon. And I know last year when they went up, we heard lots of great feedback. Some of the pictures on the banners are pretty special of people when they served so many years ago. So I think that's a wonderful tribute that we do continue to honor our veterans. So that'll be going up soon. And then lastly, for everybody in attendance, either virtually or in person, we are currently hiring for our summer pool staff, and we have intern positions available, Tom, I believe in almost every department within the municipality, more or less.
Yeah, and we have them float around.
Okay, so if you know a young person who's looking for an internship opportunity and wants to know more about municipal government and the work that is done here day in and day out with our wonderful staff, please encourage them to apply for an internship or come work at the pool. That's a fun job. I think that's all I have. So we are going to move on to unfinished business. So I'd like to call up the chief, Lieutenant Finkel, and we're going to have some continued discussion on police staffing. Everyone received,
So before Councilman Luce recuses himself, given the fact that it's kind of two separate topics here, one being the administrative sergeant position, and then the other topic being a sweeping expansion of the police department. And I think that given only the administrative sergeant position is really what he's conflicted on, he shouldn't have to miss the rest of the discussion. We should break it up into two different topics and go from there.
When I spoke to Eric, Mr. Coos is conflicted out because his father works for the department. So anything related to the police department, technically he should be recused for.
Counselor, anything to add? And I probably should have asked you to introduce yourself, since you're covering tonight.
Brian Hack from Eric Bernstein's office. I agree with that opinion, yes. Should recuse himself.
So recuse.
Okay, so we have two additional communications, one from Mr. Russo dated April 11th, entitled Police Department Staffing 3.0. And one with the same date from the police department, specifically from our chief. So Chief Danbell, do you want to start?
Sure.
Or Mr. Russo?
I'll start. So in my memo, at the last meeting, there was, conversation about were there other options that were considered prior to me and the chief recommending the administrative sergeant position. So in the 3-page memo that stated April 11th, version 3, our recommendation was based on three benefits: cost effective, operational efficiency, and the morale and career development. We did evaluate other considerations: a civilian administrative manager, a contracted administrative consultant, possibly even a detective position to see how that would play out. And then also something of the level of a deputy chief, a captain or lieutenant. And the reason we settled on the administrative sergeant was that the cost obviously was more favorable than the deputy chief, the captain and the lieutenant. It would have the ability to have sworn supervisory authority. The administrative impact would be high, minimal operational disruption, and there would be internal acceptance. So those other avenues were considered and analyzed, and, you know, we don't need to really go over them, but there are obviously pros and cons to these other options. But the one that we settled on at this time was the administrative sergeant. Then what the chief had pulled together, and really more his purview is, you know, what does the Newton Police Department look like in the future? So I had asked him to kind of pull together some information. On page 2 of his memo, he gives you call volume for Sparta, Hapag-Hong, Vernon, and then obviously Newton. And, you know, it's very telling. Hapag-Hong has 29 officers. Their volume is 17,000. Sparta has 33 to 36 officers. Their volume is about 34,000. Vernon has 33 officers, about 27,000. Newton has a greater call volume than Vernon, and we have 10 less officers. So, you know, there was some analysis of these other towns to see, you know, what their standards are and how their table of organization works. Obviously, we're looking at a short-term solution, but to the chief's credit and, you know, the staff, they're looking long-term. What does the future of the Newton Police Department look like? So the chief can walk through his forecast of what it may look like in the future in regards to a captain, sergeant, the patrol officer positions, and then I think, you know, we'll see if there's any questions at that point. Chief?
Great. Well, I prepared some remarks I would like to just go over. First, thank you for taking the time to hear all my remarks regarding the staffing of the Newton Police Department. I would also like to thank you for allowing me to conduct further research into the matter, because originally I believe I was wrong. I did not realize how understaffed we are in comparison to other agencies in our county. I truly believe we are having effective conversations, the matter at hand. You've received an updated ordinance as to where I honestly believe the department should be at over the next 10 years. Public safety is a cornerstone of a thriving community. The Newton Police Department has long upheld its commitment to protecting and serving our residents. But as our town grows and the demands of law enforcement evolve, our department must adapt to meet these challenges effectively. Over the past 2 decades, the department has undergone multiple structural changes, adjusting to staff limitations while maintaining operational efficiency. However, we have now reached a critical point where further strategic adjustments are necessary to ensure continued safety, stability, and effective leadership. With that said, I think the first step is to realize that the department has been stagnant for many years, and I think it is time to look to grow the department that equals the growth of our town. The increases would greatly benefit the safety of personnel and our town. We are mostly a reactive department due to manpower and resources. The increase would completely enhance our capabilities to be more proactive and provide an even greater level of service to the town and its residents. This staffing increase will enhance the department's ability to effectively manage operations, maintain public safety, and meet the growing needs of our community. Approval of this request will align the department's staff structure with its operational demands to ensure continued excellence in law enforcement services. I believe this model would bring the department up to date on services that are already handled by our town, currently overburdened staff, and would be sustainable for more than 10 years. I would suggest to make a plan to hire, promote officers in phases to properly budget for the increases. I believe starting with the adoption of the ordinance and hiring promoting officers within our budget this year would be a great start, and then analyze for the future. Starting with the administrative sergeant and the replacement of that patrolman. I would like to state again that I am asking for this ordinance change to allow for the future expansion of the police department. I am not asking for any other positions other than previously stated. The purpose restructuring plan is not about expansion for the sake of expansion. It is a calculated, fiscally responsible investment in the long-term effectiveness of our police force. This expansion may take 10 years to be fulfilled, but it starts with us here today. I have the proposed timeline. I'm not going to read that verbatim. That is in the memo. I think this structured approach ensures a smooth transition while maintaining operational efficiency. I do realize this may seem like a lot on paper. If we look to follow this proposed plan in the year 2028, we would have a 28-man police department. I believe it's a good starting point. And while trying to predict the future is often difficult, I think a comprehensive budget review is needed every year to determine how many, if any, positions could be filled. The answer may be 0 for some years. I believe this plan matters, maintaining leadership and institutional knowledge by strategically placing hires or phasing hires over the next several years. We ensure a seamless transition of leadership as key personnel retire, which we historically do. Without these adjustments, we risk gaps in command that could disrupt operations and compromise our ability to respond effectively to emergencies. As previously stated, the addition of the administrative sergeant will provide a much needed oversight and support, allowing officers to focus on critical law enforcement duties and others to focus on their administrative functions. I do believe reintroducing the captain's position will strengthen the department's leadership structure, improving coordination, supervision, and long-term strategic planning, preparing for growth. The nature of policing continues to change, requiring a well-trained and properly staffed force to address issues such as community engagement, emergency preparedness, and modern crime trends. Being responsible, budget-conscious approach, this plan spreads hiring across multiple years, ensuring that the growth is measured and sustainable. By prioritizing hires based on need and anticipated retirements, we maximize efficiency while respecting budget constraints. We ask for your support in the adoption of this ordinance and to be open to a restructuring plan. It doesn't need to be the one that I put together. I think there should be more discussion about that. I want the same thing as you, a safe, prosperous town. Investing in our police department today means a safer, stronger Newton tomorrow. Let's work together to ensure our officers have the resources, leadership, and personnel necessary to continue their vital mission of serving and protecting the community. Thank you for your consideration, and I'm open to any questions.
So just as a matter of clarification, in Mr. Russo's memo, there's one proposed ordinance, and then Chief, in your memo, there's a little bit of a different structure in the
Sure.
proposed ordinance.
Yeah, so the conversation obviously is still based on the administrative sergeant, but I wanted the chief politely, the way I described it to him was, go big, right? Like what does this department, I'll be gone, the chief will be gone, some of the council may or may not, like there's going to be turnover in this organization. What does this department look like long-term? So we need the Band-Aid short-term, but I appreciate him kind of envisioning, and Dan as well. Dan eventually will move up in rank. But what does this department look like in the next 3, 5, 7, 10 years when most of us are no longer here? Obviously, we don't have to do the chief's version tonight or at the next meeting. There's the immediate need for the administrative sergeant, but understand there is a long-term vision based on what the call line might look like retirements, et cetera. So it's a good discussion point. And you know, the police captain, the chief is looking at, you know, that has to align with the contract, so we're looking at 2027. So we're not looking to implement everything in one fell swoop, but there is a long-term goal here of making sure the staffing is better aligned with the needs of the town.
Mhm. I certainly respect that perspective because I think it's something that we've been talking about over several budget cycles. And I think for as long as I've been serving on the government body is like, what is the succession plan? What's the strategy for making sure that officers are ready, both technically and credential wise, step into leadership positions. And then I know that we've talked a lot about, I'm not gonna say the age, the experience of the department. We've seen a lot of retirements, well earned, over the last several years of fantastic officers. And we know, I can, thank you for the timeline because we kind of know what's coming down in terms of again, future well-earned retirements. And we have official notification from Lieutenant Wolanski with regards to his retirement at this point.
Yep.
Thank you for also noting like already what's in the current budget. And again, I think this is a blueprint, right? It's not a done deal. I think a couple of council people did have some questions or concerns, perhaps in previous conversations about, well, if the entire ordinance is expanded, does that mean there isn't the opportunity for conversation in the future when these positions may or may not be filled depending on the budget for the council to weigh in, like once the ordinance is there, does that conversation kind of no longer need to exist?
So if I can comment on that,
Yeah.
I mean, the ordinance just says the maximum. I mean, we have a maximum now of 24 officers. We don't have 24 officers. I mean, it's been like that for over a decade and we're at 22 for 10 years, if not more. We just got one more with the school resource Officer Bellis that got us back to 23. It's just the maximum. It says there's nothing in there that says we have to fill this. It is allowing the police department to grow per budget season if it's fiscally responsible and in the budget. I mean, if it's not in the budget, there's nothing in that ordinance that says we have to have this.
Yeah.
It's just a maximum.
It's a good point. Thank you also for putting in the statistics from the other police departments. I mean, I just did some quick numbers and I know that multiple officers respond to calls, but if you look at, so the average call per officer in Sparta last year was 971 calls. In Hopatcong, it was 586 calls. And of course, Sparta, Hopatcong, and Vernon are larger square miles, but Vernon average number of calls per officer is 818. Based on our numbers, average call per officer on an annual basis is 1,217. In some cases we're 30% higher and other cases we're 3 times or 2.5 times higher than some of the other municipalities. So I think that was a good reference. And then also just their structure of how many lieutenants, sergeants, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you for doing that. Those were some of my initial just questions and thoughts, but would love to hear from my colleagues. Sandy, I'll go to you first.
I very much appreciate the fact that you've set this forward the way you have, because it gives us a very good idea of what we need to look forward to and what we need to plan for. And so I definitely appreciate this, and I actually support this very much. I think it's a good plan, and having it based on budget availability, not literally, oh, we're gonna do this in this year, based on all budget availability and need, as you said. I support this, and I know in the past we've had a captain. I know we had more lieutenants. Exactly when those different positions disappeared, if it had to be done by ordinance, I would love to know how that was done if it wasn't done by ordinance.
No,
It was done by ordinance. But I can see why we should have those things reinstated. So I support this.
And my earlier comment was not to diminish the budget process. I know that that is something that our municipality takes very seriously. Tom squared. You know, we probably work 6 months, not
Mhm.
we, but the
Tom.
departments at Tom, and the department has worked 6 months or better on every department and put forth a very thoughtful budget every year. Being fiscally responsible, and I know those would be ongoing conversations, but wanted to make mention of that. All right, Councilwoman Teets. Thoughts?
So one of our questions, I think, from the previous meeting, and if I missed it in one of the versions, but we had talked about like what doesn't get done. And I don't know if I saw that. Like,
Well,
I think,
I am very proud to say that we get everything done.
right,
It's just how long things take and how much extra hours our guys are putting in, and being overburdened is the problem. I hold my staff very high because they do get things done. And I don't want that to be a knock on, you know, our guys for getting their stuff done, even though it may take them quite some time and being pulled away in 18 different directions because they hold very many hats. So I would say nothing is not getting done. We are doing what we need to get done. If there's something that I could say is not getting done is us being proactive on a law enforcement side rather than just running around answering call after call after call after call. That would be the only thing I say could not be getting done, or should I say could be done better with more manpower.
And so just to be clear, an example of something that might take longer is a response to,
Sometimes we have calls stacked up,
okay,
you know, it's it's the nature of policing. It happens, but when I have X amount of officers on and they're all tied up on calls and traffic's backed up and, we could be enforcing something, it's almost a second to answering calls. Where if in 10 years this came to fruition and every squad had an extra guy and we had a traffic bureau and another detective, it just helps us handle our call volume better.
or administratively, because we're talking about an administrative sergeant.
Absolutely.
I think Lieutenant Finkel has told us before administratively what's happening now.
Yeah, so I think if we're talking about the administrative standpoint, I think that is one thing where we're getting the things that need to be done day to day. We're putting out those fires every day, but we have a lot of things that we need to be looking toward the future, preparing things for the next few years, as we discussed earlier, for the up and coming ranks and officers who will be, moving up the ranks in relatively short time. Those things really need to be focused on more, and that there's certainly no free time for us to really, make sure we're doing our due diligence and preparing these officers for what they're going to be facing very soon. As the chief said, a lot of us, Lieutenant Wolanski, myself, spend a lot of our time off, handling things all the time, just keeping us up to being to like put out those fires day to day. We're constantly, spending our free time, doing that, trying to complain about, but it's not sustainable to expect that forever, especially with the continual increase in not only call volume, but the administrative responsibilities that we have. It's just not sustainable for the future. And if we're going to give the attention to these type of things for the officers' benefit in the future, we really need to start figuring out how we're going to manage that task, because that's something that is coming that needs to be focused on, and we're barely keeping up with the things that we have by putting in a lot of extra hours ourselves to keep up with just getting through the day. So there are a lot of things that I think are very important to building the future of the department, making sure things remain solid. And then when the more elder officers like ourselves do accept that retirement one day, that we're not leaving these officers unprepared, that they've had, all of the bricks put in place to build that future for them.
And in previous meetings, you had made reference to a backlog in firearms applications, Oprah responses. I think there was another thing that you were directly talking about that's happening because of the current staffing.
Right, and that's a good point, is that, as the chief talked about, stacking calls sometimes, and the officers needing to kind of decide what's the priority at the moment and get to those things later on.
Same on
Same
the-
thing
yeah.
happens on the administrative level.
Right.
Things sometimes just don't get handled for a while, and sometimes there's things that just have to get done that
Right.
day. And other things have to take a back seat. And so that's a daily thing that we have to do, is prioritize what needs to be done. And there's a lot of things that are backlog like that are just like when you're working the road and you have too many calls and not enough officers. Same thing happens upstairs in the administrative world. It's just, we can only be in one place at one time. There's only so many of us. So that's definitely happening.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just found my notes. Firearms applications, reviewing of footage, community policing, construction detail, the drone stuff, more calls, cannabis retailers, changes in laws, Oprah requests, unfunded state mandates.
Yeah, so like
Animal control.
take that list, we need to prioritize firearms, Oprah, because those are hard deadlines. And so the follow-up on an investigation, the community engagement, that's all taking back seat. We gotta get these things done first, because those are state mandated deadlines. We're gonna get it done, but other things are gonna take the back seat until the things that we have to get done are done.
Michelle, more questions, thoughts?
I did have one, but I didn't write it down, so probably while Matt's talking, it will come back to me.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Dixon?
All right, so. Newton population, 8,240, Pacon population, 14,622. Sparta population, 20,195, and Vernon population, 22,440. Numbers out there. What goes into the numbers? You have 23 officers. Why is specials not included into that count? And is it included in any of these counts for any of the other municipalities?
No,
Or officers.
those are their full-time officers. The 23 is our full-time officers. Specials can only do certain things. They are part-time, mainly used to walk the Spring Street. They are not to handle certain calls due to union issues.
And statutory, that's
Yeah,
Title
yeah.
40 thing. Their responsibilities are limited.
Right. Again, to go with the population, they may have a greater population. We're still handling the same amount of calls for service as those other towns.
Okay.
And then
So what goes into the call volume?
what do you mean what goes in?
What type of calls?
Every call,
Every call.
every call.
Animal control?
No,
No.
no animal control.
Police department.
Yeah, just police. I mean, I could include animal control calls that the police
Radio
respond to.
tests, like what are we, or is it all just calls for service?
Total calls for service for 2024.
Anything that requires an officer to handle.
Right.
handle.
Again, I was gonna go with the population. So we are at 9,000-ish. I did a quick poll of some larger businesses, things in town, that we have, in between, Thor Labs, the college, the hospital, the schools, within those 4 locations, that's an added 5,000 people during the day that we have, in town.
What, you said additional 5,000 between those?
Between those 4. I tried to get a number on county services, but I couldn't get a number from the county. I think I truly believe our population during the day is probably close to 25,000, easy with,
And I think it's
with
the
everything that we
opposite. I think it's the opposite for some of those other towns where it's mainly a residential town and most
Right.
of those people commute out.
Moving out.
So I think daytime ours goes way up. Other towns probably have the opposite issue.
If we look at any other municipalities that are actually the same size as Newton,
I looked at the county. I mean, I wanted to stay local. I mean, we're handling same kind of calls as our neighbors. You know,
but if you look at just the county, we could be missing something that maybe some other municipality is doing better somewhere else, potentially. Utilizing the resources they have.
I mean, I just wanted to give you something. I didn't go into, you know, every area.
Budget permitting. We don't know what the next in line for that seat budgeting priorities are gonna be.
Mhm.
We could end up being back into a situation prior to Tom, where we're having increases of $150, $200 a year. If they're not as fiscally responsible.
That's actually our job, to oversee the budget. And to make sure that they're fiscally responsible. That's our responsibility.
Okay. Well. Maybe the five of us here are
Mhm.
fiscally responsible. That doesn't mean the five of us are gonna be sitting here. When some of these decisions need to be made.
That could be true, but then it becomes their responsibility.
Yeah.
To Matt's point, and you know, the point's well taken, that there has to be a conscious
Right.
effort and understanding of, you know, like when Tom and I put the budget together. Kind of had an idea of where the council would like to land, because there's certainly the past few years, there's been a consistent pattern in terms of what the nominal increase would be, right? So we kind of went into it this year having that as our governing philosophy before we presented the budget. That's why there were no changes. It's very reasonable every year, and you know, I only have a couple more budgets before I retire, that as part of the cycle, you know, when Dan's chief or whatever, you say, when the chief comes in, you know, what's the current staffing model? Is it working? Is it not? And what is budgeted in terms of growth priorities, like just having that as an annual conversation. And, you know, I'll take some responsibility. I could have done a better job of doing that this past go around, but like going forward, I think, you know, for public works, water and sewer, you know, the biggest departments, right, will always be public works and police.
Mhm.
Just with all of us, you know, it's incumbent, I think, on all of us while we're here, just do a better job of communicating and saying, you know, what's the current staffing? And, you know, we do the budget hearing in February. What does it look like at the end of the year? And then does the budget align with that? And that budget then acceptable to the five of you? Because I could propose hiring X number, I could, and you know, I've had multiple chiefs, no disrespect to the chiefs. I always get wish lists and I always whittle it back because, and you know, they should advocate for certain things, but then I'm the first barrier to say, no, we're not gonna do that. Or the fire department, you know, I've moved trucks further out, right? Because the trucks, you know, the next truck's gonna be a $2 million truck. Okay, so all right, maybe it's not the year to do it, right? So we're always kind of maneuvering, and then I think it's just incumbent to Matt's point to say, where does this budget get us from a staffing standpoint, and is that something we can afford?
Mhm.
Because there have been years where we could not afford
Mhm.
additional staffing, and I've punted and I've punted, and then, you know, we've been blessed the past couple of years that we can have these conversations. Some years we just might not be able to,
Mhm.
and I think that's just on all of us to say, hey, can we afford to do this? Sometimes the answer is no,
Right.
right? I mean,
Exactly.
so.
And to the chief's point, I mean, you said the ordinance would say a maximum up to, we have an ordinance right now that says a maximum up to, and we're
Right.
below that
Right.
level. Because of whatever reason. Matt, what other concerns or questions?
Have one. This is to put Tom and Tom on the spot, sorry, but hypothetically. You know, I know when we first had this conversation, you know, the money was basically in the budget. and that we could absorb it for the 2025, but what do you estimate going forward, like, with salaries and benefits? Because I know Sandy's very concerned with, the senior population and,
I usually do a worst case 1.5 times salary scenario. Like, for the chief and I, our salaries are 175, 180. But the cost to the municipality is, X, right?
Yeah.
So for next year, the chief leaves at 180 or 185, whatever his salary is in 26. All right, so you're gonna have savings from the Annabelle, right, of 100,000, right? Because we're gonna be bringing in somebody at 50. So we save on him, and then you're gonna have these 2 additional. So theoretically, on salary, it could almost be a wash. And keep in mind, the new people coming in, a lot of them tend to be single. So the cost is less on the health insurance. You have the Chapter 78. They're coming in at a lower cost plan and they want to buy up on the plan. So next year could be not a wash, but it could be somewhat favorable. 27, adding a new captain, I mean, that's a $200,000 position in 20, like that's going to be.
With the benefits.
Well, and salary alone, just think about it, the chief's salary is
yeah,
gonna
it's
go up.
180, yeah.
Chief Finkel will have his salary demands and he's very aggressive. That'll be what it's gonna be. You hire a captain, so now you got a captain, the
Mhm.
next round of contracts, you're gonna have lieutenants making 160, 170, 180. I mean, and I'm not saying this to be flipped, but like these numbers will only go up. So in 27, you'll see a delta between captains. Because then you're gonna have the new officer to replace Flanagan. So in 27 and 28, I think that's where there's more stress points on the budget. Whereas this year we can absorb, and because think about it, we're already in April. Right? I mean, like by the time we get this moving and adopted, if we do that and hire and in the academy, and the year's gone before you know it. Next year, like I said, it'll be savings when the chief retires, depending on when the terminal leave starts, right, in October, and then the 2 additional. But yeah, I would always use salary times X because of the pension and the healthcare costs that are pretty substantial. Right, Tom? I mean, tell me, that's right. Rule of thumb.
Yeah, I mean, this year was only 1 point, and the state basically took away 1 tax point from us too. With this, this extra person that Tom included, we were talking about animal control, where we could move some of that salary. If we did have additional monies in there, and something comes up, we could always transfer in November. It's always good to have it in, than not, and be proactive rather than reactive. So that's my take on that.
And come 2027, you may not be able to fill that. I'm not gonna be here, I just, this is the progression that I think this police department should be at in 10 years. In 2027, like Tom said, you might not be able to hire that captain position. But in 2030, you might,
Actually, Michelle's question makes me think too, we've talked about overtime. Lieutenant Finkel just said, like, the work's getting done, but people are, the leadership's doing it on their days off. The staff is working overtime. I agree that is not sustainable, nor is that the culture of wellness and employee satisfaction that we want to continue sustaining. But is it reasonable to think with the additional staffing that what we're seeing in overtime in the budget could also be reduced?
if we had, in a perfect world, if this was adopted and filled in 2032 with this staffing, I would think, but overtime would be limited to water and sewer details, parades, outside employment, which has nothing to do with our budget, because filling the open patrol shifts, you'd have an extra personnel. Somebody takes a vacation, you don't have to fill it because we have staffing minimums, right? So if somebody takes off that day, we wouldn't have to fill, that shift, just kind of like we do now when if we're on a short squad somebody takes off or takes a sick day, that's overtime because we're not fully staffed. This would help with anybody, any call out.
In other words, basically, okay. 2027, we can't hire a captain, but we might be able to hire another officer.
Correct.
So that would eliminate more overtime
Correct.
without even having a captain's position.
Right.
So this is not something that you're gonna do this year, this year, this year, and this year. This is laying out a groundwork.
Correct. I just threw something together so you had something to look at.
And you're right. I mean, I think when you have a certain number of officers, you know, that we have, it is responsible at some point to be like, well, we're not going to hire officers. When those situations happen, we'll just cover it with overtime. But it happens a lot. And there will be that tipping point where are we really making the wise decision to pay overtime for all those circumstances anymore? Where should we really consider adding that on to realize some of those savings? And that's I think a conversation I think that happens every year as long as I've worked here at the council level. You know, the police overtime budget is always one of those hot topics. It's forever, and you know, rightfully so. And at some point, you know, you have to trust that people that are looking at it the right way and saying, no, we're not going to make that higher this year. We're just going to stick with paying overtime. And other times, well, maybe we're paying too much on overtime, and that's why we do have these conversations, I think, every year about that. So.
Yeah, I mean, this year we have budgeted 210,000 in overtime. You know, we've been at 250 in 2023 and so on and so forth. So, I mean, it is a big number, and yes, it's always a point of conversation during budget
Yeah,
time.
and you know, it's a balance. I hate to say, but some years warrant the overtime dollars.
Mhm.
But when the chief approaches you as the town manager and raises the flag that the staff is burning out, now we're getting into health, wellness,
Mhm.
mental health, like burning Dan and Mike and the sergeants and the chief out, like that's not good for public safety, right? So
Yeah, that's a safety
so there's
issue.
always a balance. And, you know, I had done other research, you know, when the chief put together his reference numbers. Newark has 520,000 calls. They have 500 officers, so they're at about 1,000. Atlantic City has 300 sworn. They have 300,000 calls. They're at about 1,000. So, you know, your numbers are going to vary. 500, us being 1,200, we're kind of on the high side. So you can see just if you eyeball and say, you know what? Kind of like a common sense analysis, we're slightly understaffed. You can tell. I'm not saying 5, 10, 15 people, we're not, but 1 or 2 or 3, yeah, we're just a little bit off based on the call volume, but that also assumes static call volume.
Correct.
We don't know what the number will turn out to be this year. But if we start approaching Vernon, you know, we're past Vernon and Apacon. If we start getting to the Sparta numbers, we're going to be shy. We're going to be a squad shy, or we're going to be a few officers in each squad shy. So right now, you know, we're kind of raising the red flag with the 5 of you to say, please help us, right? And there's no personal benefit to Tom, but for the well-being of the staff, that's my responsibility. That's why we approached you guys with the request. It wasn't, you know, out of disrespect or, you know, not being conscious of the budget. It's that the officers need help, and you're the ones that can help them really more than I can, honestly. So.
Okay, other questions? Michelle, I think you had the mic. Any other questions? No? Good. Okay, Matt? Okay, so we've had ongoing discussions for about 7 weeks. Thank you for the continued conversations and all of the information, Tom, that you've put together, Chief, Lieutenant, all of the work. And I think that these are good, healthy conversations,
Yeah,
right? It
great.
provides the opportunity to think of things off the cuff as a result of the data. And I think it's a good exercise in evaluating the department against other departments, whether you're looking at call volume, types of calls, structure, budget, you know, succession planning, upcoming training, whether we take on additional shared services, whether we don't. I mean, I think it's going to be continued ongoing conversations. So I think that this has been healthy dialogue over the last several weeks, and you know, I appreciate everyone coming to the table with an open mind and being receptive to the questions. And then also being receptive to hearing the answers. So, Michelle, is there any other information you need at this time to make a decision?
I think, and you know, partially to Matt's comments in the beginning. You know, I'd probably be willing to entertain the administrative sergeant and the 2 patrol officers that we need. But I think the other version of your forecasting, you know, I think it's only fair that, you know, we do get to include all council members. I mean, you know, I've had to abstain from things previously, prior. But I was able to be part of the discussions, and I think that second phase or the second rollout, even though it's over time, to me, that's a big ask right now.
So Michelle, what I'm hearing you, what I think I'm hearing you say is that you would be amenable to adoption or modification of the ordinance based on Mr. Russo's memo of April 11th, that one that has police, 2 lieutenants, maximum of 6 sergeants, maximum of 20 officers, that one, as opposed to the one that's in the chief's memo?
Yes.
Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Sure. Yes.
Okay.
Looking at.
And Sandy, which of the 2 were you? I'm gonna come back to you because Sandy already said, was it the one that Tom put on page 1 of his memo, or the one that the chief has on page 2 of his memo? That has,
Okay,
that includes the police captain and up to 22 patrol officers.
but that's over time.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect you guys to commit to that tonight. or-
Okay,
Okay, that was my point.
No, I
Yes.
think,
Okay.
and you know, Eric and I put together the draft. It was 1 chief, 2 lieutenants, changing 5 to 6
Mhm.
sergeants, and the 16 the max. And remember,
maximum, yeah.
part of the logic of the max was we're not supposed to exceed the maximum at any time.
Right.
But with the timing of the retirements in the academy, we wanted that flexibility because there might be a time where somebody is not yet on terminal, but we have to get somebody in the academy and the number artificially bloats because of the timing.
Mhm.
That was the reason when we came with the draft, we did the 20 because I wanted that flexibility, because we're not supposed to ever exceed the ordinance.
Right.
And I want to just ensure that we're never in a position where we're playing games with that, because that's not right. We're not supposed to. So that was the rationale of going from the 16 in the ordinance to the 20, was to have that flexibility, not necessarily to add more bodies, but to just recognize that I can't control the timing. Sick leave, terminal, somebody gets called out for the
Military,
Yeah,
right.
Right, and it just. So, yeah, the original draft is still where we'd like to be. We're
Okay.
Introducing it at the next meeting.
Okay,
And an understanding that there's still further discussions to have in the future about the budget and the staffing, but we want to get this done this year because it's budgeted and because, you know, we want to alleviate some of the staff burden that we're experiencing.
okay, so understood, just so everybody's on the same page for the consideration for the council tonight is what's italicized in paragraph 2 on Tom's memo dated April 11th. For the ordinance to be amended, for a chief police to maximum of 2 lieutenants, maximum of 6 police sergeants, maximum of 20 patrol officers, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so now Matt, do you have what you need to make a decision?
What's the current ordinance? What was it?
Current
2, 5, and
5, 16.
16?
Mhm.
Yeah, you see in
Right.
the draft
Right.
brackets.
So
Yeah.
we're not entertaining any other
No, it would be,
formats?
no,
It's that or nothing?
well,
Because I mean.
so what are you thinking?
Well, we had a whole pros and cons list here of other alternative options, and we haven't really discussed that.
Okay,
We haven't discussed whether everybody's in favor of the administrative sergeant or going with a civilian administrative manager.
Okay, so let's have that discussion. Go
I
ahead,
mean,
you wanna
that-
start the
that- I mean,
conversation?
That's just what I'm in favor,
You're in
Okay, wait.
favor of the,
the civilian manager.
okay, Sandy, is that something that you're in favor of?
I'm not quite sure I'm in favor of that. Because they would have no real authority over the staff for the operational issues. So what would be the pros versus the cons other than what's listed? I mean, how could a civilian administrator alleviate the situation as far as overseeing?
They couldn't oversee staff directly, but they could do administrative paperwork, firearms, Oprah, like they could handle something, page 2 of my memo from this meeting. They could do some of the paperwork and the minutia. But they wouldn't have authority over the sworn staff. And, there's a credibility issue of having a civilian in the nest versus somebody who's sworn with authority to, make decisions. So, but, to Matt's point, administratively, it makes sense financially, which is why that was one of the things I had looked at, right? You're not dealing with PFRS, lower salary, there's no sworn officer benefits. So, if you look at page 2 under the alternatives, that was one of the first things that popped into my head was, can this be handled administratively? So part of it can, and then part of it can't. So it's kind of a mixed bag.
But then
Right.
that person doesn't add response power or policing power. And it's been my observation in Sussex County, and I'm not gonna call out departments, but departments that have had civilian leadership have undoubtedly had issues. Reporting structure issues, morale issues, credibility issues. I mean, that, and whatever, because of just,
Well, because you're dealing with unions and, some towns will play games and I just say which town had a town called me today to ask about hiring a police director. And I had to give the pros and cons because administratively, he or she or they can do the work. But it tanks morale and then you have this, contest between the union and the sworn staff and the civilian. And trust me, I saw it in Parsippany years ago. It doesn't end well. Honestly, in a perfect world,
becomes a political
you'd
issue.
have both. To Matt's point, you'd have an administrative person who's a civilian doing minutia that nobody else wants to do. And you'd have the sergeant
Mhm.
operationally overseeing animal control, special, like,
Right.
I'm not suggesting that, but I'm saying like, if you had the resources operationally, that would be the smartest approach if it was financially feasible. Because then you're saving the money and you're recognizing they don't want to do some of the administrative tasks because they're sworn officers, they want to be doing law enforcement.
Police work,
activity,
right.
Right, and then you have the sergeant, but I'm not recommending that, but I'm saying that to Matt's point, you kind of could see how it would kind of go in that direction where you'd have $40,000 a year civilian. And you'd have your sergeant who was engaged in other things, and maybe oversees Justin Bellis, oversees the specials. Is another school resource officer, oversees animal control,
Well, and maybe Matt,
had-
somewhere that's the hybrid. I'm sorry, Tom, that maybe that's somewhere in this timeline. Perhaps from a budget perspective, that's the hybrid in 2027, you slip in the administrative person, or you know what I mean? Budget dependent, but you,
Or when Diane leaves, or when
Right,
Carol.
right,
right.
Carol's
right.
ready to, retire
Right.
soon, right, or like Carol could retire. Is that an opportunity, right, because then you're gonna have a new.
as opposed to administrative
Right,
position.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so.
I'm not trying to be a stickler here.
No, no.
I'm just trying to see if, there's some way we can kind of reevaluate it a little bit.
So to me, I think that's
I'm trying
that,
to make some concessions here too. like-
sure. I think that's something, I think that position, and again, this is Chief Danville's memo is a proposed timeline for structure changes, whatever, how many years out. I think that's perhaps a position that could be put in there or inserted into that timeline, right? Budget permitting, to help with some of the administrative things. Certainly want to exhaust all the conversations, but, or all the alternatives, but
You could have a public relations person, you could have an IT person, you could have a payroll person
Right,
who's not,
right.
you know, I mean, like, there's so many functions, that's why I said maybe when there's other changes in the department. You have those conversations, I'll probably be gone at that point, but the chief too, but like. I think Matt's on track, I just think the timing. Based on the specific needs of the department now, push us in the direction of the administrative sergeant more than
Yeah.
the civilian. But I think in the next year or two, based on what's coming down the pike in terms of retirements. I think that's when you can have that broader conversation. To push some things in that direction. That's just my gut feeling. Obviously, whatever the council direction is, we're happy to follow. That question.
Matt, did you want to discuss 2 or 3 or? I don't think you want to talk about the deputy chief, captain or lieutenant.
No.
Scenario. Okay.
Maybe you pick that up.
Um. So I think unless there's other options or possibilities to deliberate, I think what we need to make a decision on tonight is if we are comfortable with preparing for the next meeting, adoption of the ordinance that Tom has put into his memo. Introduction. Yeah, sorry, adoption, right, introduction of the ordinance that Tom is proposing in the second paragraph of his memo.
I have
Any other
something to
discussion?
say, okay. Well, I'm leaning more, well, I have this, but every time we write an ordinance, change an ordinance, that always requires money to be laid out. So why can't we just do it all in one ordinance where we are setting the pace for the future, establishing this presently, but basically setting forth the future possibilities with nothing in concrete saying we have to do this.
Well, it's not that expensive to change, I mean, to codify is, we have the contract with municipal code to codify. So I don't let cost of the ordinance drive your decision making.
I just want to make sure I understand what Sandy was saying. So you're saying, introduce this ordinance, but then also put in there what a future ordinance might look like?
Basically, yeah, but the future.
I don't know that we can really clearly do that.
Say to build in Joe's.
Well,
Yes.
you don't have the consensus for that, and
Right.
I don't want
Yeah.
to do a fourth meeting candidly.
Yeah.
You know, like,
Okay.
if there's 3 who want to agree to the draft, then we introduce that. I think. There will be time in the future to have those conversations. Like, don't burden yourself tonight or at the next meeting. It's easy to update the ordinance, you know, it's like, don't.
And not to make assumptions, but Michelle, just to be clear too, you're at this point, you're not comfortable with going with Chief Danville's proposal. You're more comfortable with Tom's proposal. Is that correct, or do I have that
Yes.
wrong? Okay.
No, yeah, I was on a different memo at the time you were going, and I'm like, but I don't see italicized. Right? So that was on me, but yes. The
Okay.
way Tom's ordinance is written.
Okay, and Sandy, you're good with Tom's ordinance?
I tend to, yes,
Oh, yes?
yes.
Okay, and I am good with Tom's ordinance. Deputy Mayor, how are you?
That's better.
Well, it's,
It doesn't matter, no, there's 3, that's good.
all right,
Use it.
I think we have our next steps, correct?
Thank you all for this. It's not a-
No, and I thank you, I thank you all as well. Thank you.
Anything else? Either of you?
No,
Okay.
appreciate your support, thank you.
All right,
All right,
thank you for all the information.
Thank you.
All right, Mayor, we have planner Jessica Caldwell, we have some sets of documents to review with the governing body.
Before we go to that, can I just say real quick to Joe and to Dan to get the message back, that this week is public safety telecommunicators week. So, you know, love our dispatchers.
We do.
And please express our heartfelt appreciation for the work that they do. And they are a very valuable part of the police department.
Absolutely. And we have to acknowledge Michelle, 30 years?
28.
28, sorry. I'm not giving you more experience. I don't like to say older, aging, whatever, but yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah.
Mayor, if it's okay, I'd like to actually do the status of affordable housing first, because that one's pretty straightforward.
Okay,
We'll walk through that one.
so for everybody else who still might be with us, we're on item 8 of the agenda discussion. As Tom said, we have Jessica Caldwell from J. Caldwell and Associates here. We have 2 memos that she gave to us dated the status of affordable housing is dated April 8th and short-term rentals April 14th. So we're gonna switch and go to item 2 first and talk about affordable housing.
Yeah, I think so, because, we'll discuss the council's role. We have planning board involvement,
Yep.
and then we can go into the short-term rental, which I'll give some information.
Okay, so Tom, do you want to do an overview first, or should we turn it over to Jessica to?
No,
an
just
overview
you
of
you
her-
recall that we adopted the resolution committing to the fair share. There were no challenges, so our obligation was established March 1st. Jess will kind of walk through next steps, our responsibilities, meaning all of you and the planning board. So all yours, Jess.
And I just wanted to make mention that we're rejoined by Councilman Coos at 8:13. Terry.
Okay, good evening, Mayor, members of the council. I submitted the memo as well as a draft of our housing element and fair share plan. We did accept the DCA's obligation for round 4. And let's see. We have through, it was 72. And we have a 4th round present need or rehabilitation need, which is 45. When we initially started in round 3, we had a really high number obligation. So we really wove that into set asides into our redevelopment plans. We increased our inclusionary zone, which is SD9 up by the hospital. We increased the density there and added a mixed use component. As well as over time, the town has always supported like Katie's House and various group homes and other types of affordable housing and supportive housing. So all in all, we've actually exceeded your obligation already. What we did was went through round 3. I can summarize, what credited towards round 3. So I should tell you what happened in the second part of round 3 was there was a revision of the obligations and it went down dramatically. So while we had done all that work, we kind of just banked it into the future, and rather than undoing any of those ordinances or, worrying about like, oh, let's take that away or not do any of this work, we just left everything in place. And now I think it's really paying off because we're not having to look for new places to rezone. So in the 3rd round, there was some Bristol Glen assisted living units, Progressive Health residential healthcare, 4 units. Samaritan Inn has done some work in town. There's 14 transitional family units. Katie's House, the 2 group homes there, count for 5 units. We have a community options group home, which was 4 units. And then the Newton Town Center Senior, because there's senior caps on every round. So there's a maximum amount of senior units you can count towards each round. So round 3 was 25%. Round 4, they moved it up to 30%. So in round 3, we counted 15 of the 65 Newton Town Center units. We also had Clayton Square, which provided 6 family rentals. So right there, we accounted for the 3rd round obligation, which was 83 units. It's page 28 of, yeah.
And is the community options house the new one that's on Mason?
Mason? I think
Mason,
so,
yeah,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So then, for round 4, they put in all of the redevelopment plans that we have. So we have Patterson Avenue, Hicks Avenue, and Merriam Gateway.
Mhm.
Page 31, all continue to have inclusionary components to them. And so our obligation is really to zone for those. Do we know if they will get developed right away? We don't know, but circumstances can change and the zoning is there.
So
We
Jessica,
have-
so if we zone to them, does that at least show in good faith that we are planning for them?
Yeah,
In
that's
Co's-
your
in
obligation,
Co's
really.
eyes? Like,
Yeah,
Okay, like,
your obligation is to provide the opportunity
okay,
for them to occur. If they don't occur because of the market or
Right.
what have you, as long as we provided reasonable zoning, we
Right.
didn't provide like something that no one's ever gonna build or something like that.
yeah.
It's really, when those places get ready to redevelop, they'll, redevelop under that zoning.
Because I recall the third round and then the third round changes and we're at that time talking about RPM. The other building on the corner was vacant and then the use got changed and like there was all these, and we were still able to at least like show good faith that we had these areas, whether they were zoned for redevelopment or potential projects that could be coming up, that they would help us meet our obligation, which obviously we're showing.
Yeah.
But so this is the same kind of rules in fourth round, right? That-
Right, right. And so we're just extending a lot of those credits. I mean,
Okay,
actually, when we submitted to court in 2015, I think we were one of the only towns I know of where Fair Share Housing Center did not intervene in our case because we had so many extra units. They
Yeah.
were just like, okay, looks good. See you later. And we didn't have to, they kind of teased me about like, oh, we didn't even intervene in your case. And I was like, it was surprising
Mhm.
because they 100% intervene in everybody else's cases. So I think that shows that we're definitely have a good faith effort
Okay.
going and there hasn't been a lot of concerns. The SD9 is still there. And I really think the reason that one hasn't developed is that the property owner just hasn't been ready to develop it. It's really not. They did intervene in our third round and asked for some additional zoning tweaks and we gave it to them, but I don't think it's anything wrong with the zone or the property. It's just they're really more commercial developers.
So
They
for
just haven't
common
done-
terminology, SD9 is,
Is next to the hospital.
right,
The
next to the
Lentini
hospital,
farm.
yeah, yeah,
So they've kept it as a farm. They haven't developed it,
yeah.
so that's fine. That's zoned to account for 62 units. And then we apply another 20 units from the Newton Town Center to the fourth round. And then we have a CCI Foundation Group home.
Mhm.
And so we met 72 units for the fourth round obligation, and we're still carrying over 92 units
Mhm.
into the fifth round.
We'll be here for that.
So,
How long did it take the state to go? I was gonna say, how long did it take the state to go from 3 to 4?
so even if someone was to say, one of your zones doesn't work, or, we still have a lot of extra units. So, what I did was just keep everything in there, carried it forward. We have one thing I think we should pay a little more attention to in the fourth round is the rehabilitation obligation, which is, we're at 45 units. So what that means is that through census data and DCA data, there's a determination that there are units that are substandard, perhaps due to, plumbing situations or overcrowding or what have you. In the past, we have a rehab program in place, but we haven't, I would say, promoted it a whole lot in the recent history. So that might be something like maybe starting next year to look at promoting that more and trying to kick that into gear, letting people know that there's the ability
The
to.
tax abatement program specifically, or?
No, what
or
this
the
is using the development
affordable
fee
housing.
ordinance, and we also have a revolving loan fund where, let's say, someone's furnace breaks or, they need something repaired in their home that's a major system. We also can do energy efficiency things like replacing windows or doors. And it's really, code conditions, things like that. If the steps are worn out and breaking and things like that, that we can repair for seniors, people who have, low income. So we can bring those back up to code, and it's a nice thing, I think, to offer residents, that might be struggling and need some assistance with their home, and I think help support home ownership in the community. So I think it's a nice thing to do.
So this is the third time since 5:30 tonight that we've heard about people wanting us to positively promote all of the great things that are available and going on in town. So let's table that for a moment, council, but let's definitely come back to that, Tom. We heard that in some people that were interviewing for some boards and commissions tonight, that they really love everything going on in town. Wish they're hearing mostly word of mouth, how they're hearing about either events or programs is all word of mouth. They're getting the newsletter and postcards and things like that, but would love to see the town more self-promote. So, like I said, Jessica, it's the third time we've heard that tonight, so we'll have to put that on the plate to evaluate.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good thing just to focus a little more on and get the word out, put it in the newsletter, see how much money we have, and maybe make a target, let's do 10 one year, 5 1 year, whatever, whatever it is, depending on how much money comes in. So there's a 1.5% for any brand new residential and 2.5% for all commercial gets paid into the fund, and we can use that money to support this program. So I think that would be a good thing to focus on, since we don't really need to worry about the other part at this time. So, and that's really our plan. This will go to the planning board for adoption. I'm bringing it to the TRC for review, the technical review committee of the planning board. And then I'd like to put it on for adoption in May. Following that, the town council needs to endorse the plan, because there is that implementation component, like the rehab program, things that the council is in charge of doing. Most of the zoning, all of the zoning's already in place, so that's not an issue. There may be other resolutions and updating ordinances and things that go along with that. We have to submit the plan by June 30th. To what's called the program, which is the dispute resolution program that was started by the new legislation for the 4th round. And then we have until the end of the year, or until end of August, anyone can challenge the plan. If it doesn't get challenged, we have until March to complete all of we have to provide deeds and everything, proof of all the existing units that we have in town, things like that, compliance mechanisms. If it does get challenged, we have until December to sort of work out some kind of settlement with any challenge. Don't anticipate that, but if it does happen, that's a process. So I just wanted to make you aware before you see all these other things possibly coming down to you. It might be kind of rapid, because we do need to submit everything within a couple of days of adoption to the program. It's 48 hours or by June 30th, 48 hours of adoption or by June 30th. So.
Okay. And the intent is to planning board for TRC in April, planning board May, and introduce council May.
Yeah, that's the hope.
Any questions for
these.
Jessica or? Okay.
All right.
Okay.
For that, next is a memo from Jeff, April 14th. And Councilman Koo said, he brought this topic up in the past. The mayor has covered the town with regulate short-term rentals separate from long-term rentals. And the vernacular Airbnbs. So Jessica has put together some information. So obviously you have several options: status quo, where we do not engage in any type of regulation. You can consider an ordinance regulating, what does life look like for short-term rental in the town of Newton. I think there are towns that have gone the other direction and said, no, thank you, we do not want, and we're going to put that, in writing. So, we do have options for the five of you to consider. So Jess can kind of walk through her memo and some of the examples, and then we'll see if there's a consensus of what we'd like me and Jess to do going forward.
And just to mention that the New Jersey legislature has put this in the play on the laps of the municipalities. They've authorized the municipalities to regulate this. So we have to make a decision or no decision, and no decision is also a decision, right, on what we want to do. But Jess, please run us through. I have some questions
Okay,
later.
so, yeah, as Tom said, there's several different ways you can handle it. First of all, you can leave it status quo, not regulated, then it would be just sort of happen on the market. You can prohibit them. That's what Sparta did. The ordinance is attached to the memo. And they do that basically by saying no one can rent for less than 28 days in a period of time. So that essentially eliminates really what short-term rentals are. I think everybody by now has probably rented an Airbnb or a Vrbo somewhere, where you stay 1 or 2 nights or maybe a week, but you don't stay usually for 28 days. So that really just creates the long-term rentals is what people can do. You can, what most communities that I've seen have done when they regulate short-term rentals, it's more like a registration, a way to keep track of them, and also just to make sure that they're safe. And that's kind of the buckets that you go under. And basically, by registering them, what you get is a landlord or somebody who's on call that gives you their contact information, who says that they're going to be available basically 24/7 if there's a problem with the unit. Like, so that, okay, this person has an Airbnb at this place, and you have this phone number and this name as someone to call. If, usually the problems are like people are too loud or having parties or something. A lot of lake communities have those problems where it becomes a party house and people don't want to live next door to that. So they're able to get in touch with somebody right away. If the police respond, the police are able to get in touch with someone because the people at the unit don't own the unit, so they may not be as responsive or responsible for what's going on there. And, if there are noise complaints and things like that. And then the other aspect is it's almost like, doing fire inspections annually, making sure that there's, almost like a continuing CO going on, that there's smoke alarms, that the unit's safe, that just, there's no bad situation going on. And that's the other part of it, and just making sure it meets zoning, and that it kind of goes through a short, regulatory check, the fire department and usually zoning. And they pay a fee for that, and then they just get registered with the town. And usually that gets re-upped like every year. The other types of ways you could regulate it is to decide which zones it's in. But typically, the way it's regulated is based on the type of unit, because a lot of times, even though you don't realize it, there might be a residential use that's in a commercial zone. Maybe it's not permitted, but it's been there forever. So can they not rent that as a B&B because it doesn't, meet the zoning or something like that? So, just saying that any residential unit, maybe you don't want people in apartments Airbnb their apartments, so there may be different situations where it has to be a single family home or has to be owner occupied or, owned by someone, an owner unit, not someone like subletting their unit or something like that. So you can come up with different, ways to think about how you might want to rent it and run it. And usually it's based on if there's been issues in the town. A lot of times there's issues with respect to, communities, I think, where there's more of the party situation going on. But a lot of times I think the units are rented by, just regular people going to visit someplace or going to a wedding or what have you. And a lot of times they don't create any issues. So it's just a matter of trying to set up a situation, I think, that might work best for the town. Obviously they're hard to it's hard to enforce, you know, but I think if you set up a legal way for people to do it, people will tend to want to do that
Mhm.
rather than not.
Mhm.
And then also, I think if you do the registration, I think it's a little easier to get in line where you're supposed to get fees, you know, like
Mhm.
hotel tax fees from these. I think it might be a little easier to get those if you're having people register and you know where the units are and
Mhm.
to work on that as well.
Well, I mean, we know that we have a lot of apartments. We have a registration process for landlords and tenants. And we know that they're not all registered, right? So you mentioned compliance. However, I feel like with VRBO or Airbnb, it's a little bit easier. Like I just searched Verbo. There's one unit right now available. If you'd like to rent it next week or the week after in the town of Newton, and on Airbnb, there are two that are available. So I mean, you know, it's a little bit easier to look online to see what's being advertised. It's not always, you know, easy to know if
Mhm.
there's another unit being rented out for a long term. So just a couple of thoughts that I had just when I was reading through this is that we all recognize that we are a little bit unique to some municipalities because we have boarding houses, which are regulated by the state. I find it interesting, however, that the state has delegated the regulation of short-term rentals to the municipalities, but I won't go there right now. Not the rooming houses.
Makes sense.
So for me, it would be really important to clearly differentiate if we were to establish some sort of parameters or ordinance or something about like that it's very clear that it's not a boarding house, like someone can't take their property on Main Street and under the auspice of being an Airbnb with one kitchen, really running a boarding house,
Mm,
right?
That's a good point. Yeah.
Because that's like that's a differentiation, right? A boarding house has like one common kitchen with a bunch of rooms that are rented out. I know I'm making this really basic. I'm looking at Matt because he's testified on this many, many times, but you know, I wouldn't want like my house on 132 Main Street that right now has one kitchen, these bedrooms now turned into a Airbnb. And you know, then we have another boarding house situation, right? So
Yeah.
that's my one point. And then in terms of the registration fees, I noticed for at least what you provided here for West Milford, they have a first time and then they have an annual. Their annual happens, then you have to do the like fire certification and inspections and stuff on top of that, whereas Montague is like a $750 for the first time, $350 annually, but that includes fire certifications and inspections. So I guess that's all really just up to the municipality and how all that's
Yeah.
cared for. Okay,
Absolutely.
but are there some sort of guidelines? I mean, were these ordinances that was developed, Sparta notwithstanding, because they decided not to do any, but are there, although I'm gonna look on Airbnb and see if there's anything in Sparta, but there.
I'm sure there are.
I'm sure there are, but you know, is there any guidance from the state? I know, like I said, they've delegated also the municipality, but is there anything to say your ordinance should also include X, Y, Z? Is there a template? Is there, okay.
Not that I know of. I mean, we helped develop the West Milford one and we just, you know, searched
Okay.
what other towns have done. A lot of shore towns have really kind of led the way on these
Sure.
because they obviously were
Have
at
the
the
draw for
forefront of it.
Okay.
So we utilized a lot of their ordinances to figure out, you know, what would you want to look at and regulate, and then just circulating it through your departments, you know, they might
Okay.
have suggestions.
Okay.
Um,
And then, you know, the differences in application and stuff. So your firm did the West Milford Township one?
Yes.
Okay, did you also do Montague?
no,
No, okay. And then what impacts, if any, are there on our zoning? To doing this, like, do we need to do an amendment or change to the zoning to now in all of our charts, right? I'm envisioning the charts that you have to now allow as a purpose, short-term rentals, or is it covered under rentals?
it's really
period?
covered if you're allowing it in residences. It's really, I mean, the way I look at it is that you're still using it as a residence. It doesn't change the use. You're just allowing a different type of rental occupancy. So it's almost like you don't, you know, change a use when it becomes a rental. I know some people say, oh, now it's a business. Well, it's still being used as a home, you know, so I mean, that's the important distinction, and I think you're right in drawing the boarding house. You have to make sure it's still being used as the home, like a single family home or, a room in an apartment, it's not becoming something else.
Right, because Airbnb, Verbo, others, I mean, they advertise on this where you rent out a part of a house and, or, 2 bedrooms in a house, but the owner is present. Other places, they don't allow the owner, or
Right,
they're
right.
advertising it as the owner is not present. You have the whole use of the home. I think that there's so many nuances. And again, like with anything that's developed, we may have to make amendments and changes to it later as we see things change, but,
Sure.
I mean, I guess I just want to take the pulse of the council to see if people are inclined for us to have something in place, or are we kind of taking the Sparta? Again, I look at us as the county seat. Our hotel is always full. I want us to be welcoming to people who might be here for a family wedding or for a conference or a whatever. But I just don't also want us to be in a position where we don't have something in place, and I could be persuaded, but where we don't have something in place and then we find ourselves trying to enforce something we can't enforce. So I'm just wondering I'll stop talking, what everybody else is thinking.
So I think we just need to have something in place. I think it's an opportunity you don't want to pass up to, tourism, somebody could, we have some great old homes. Somebody could find one, want to rehabilitate it, make it into a beautiful Airbnb. And there's just so many different, as it's kind of grown, people that come in and use them. I know that, some of the hockey tournaments that are non-state of play, people will sometimes look at an Airbnb instead
Mhm.
because, it's a lot easier to fit a whole family in a home rather
Yeah,
than,
the kitchen,
trying to cram into a hotel room for a tournament. So, just one of those things that you don't really think about it, but, oh yeah, hey, that kind of makes sense. So I think there's so many different usages that I think we just need to be careful with how we craft it, but I definitely don't think we should turn a blind eye to it.
And then if there are concerns, I know, if there are concerns about just renting a single room, maybe you could just not allow that for now, and just, it would have to be the whole unit or something like that. It's just something to think about. Maybe it doesn't bother you, maybe it's fine, but it's just, if there's concern about things becoming a boarding house or something like that, but we could make, the other good thing is you can do a lot of definitions that kind of
Mhm.
describe everything so that it's all about enforcement and complaints. So if something comes up, at least you have to say, you can say, is this a boarding house? Because we have this definition here of what a short-term rental is and what a boarding house is. And you're not looking like a short-term rental, you're looking like a boarding house, and then at
Interesting
least you
that you
can
say that, Jessica, not to
decide.
cut you off. I'm wondering what the cloud above JP's head is saying, because he has identified several properties that for various reasons, we have reason to think that they may be operating as a board house.
Okay,
A boarding house, not a boarding house, a
Mhm.
boarding house. And it's a whole nother conversation to go down about like enforcement, regulation, all those types of things, right?
I'm gonna
We
guess.
don't have a mandatory report from our first responders on things like that for obvious reasons, but I have a fear that there are several properties in town that are kind of slipping down this slippery slope. And we may get to a point in time where we have boarding houses that have now been operating for a year or two, de facto boarding houses, and then what do you do? So that's maybe not part of this conversation, but JP, what are you thinking about?
I don't know where. So I think maybe the most complicated piece of this is the definition or the definitions. Because in the traditional sense, the boarding house, hotel, very close similarity. Yes, we may think that, when you're thinking of a hotel, you're thinking of your name brand hotel type style, but 144 Spring Street is technically a hotel.
Mhm.
And when you walk into that, it doesn't scream hotel to you, it screams boarding house.
Mhm.
So The difficult part I think we're going to have here is figuring out if we're going to entertain this, how on earth we're going to carve this out to really capture everything that's potentially going to happen. There's an argument to say that yes, by operating your house in the Airbnb style or your commercial property, whatever it is, that the municipality is otherwise missing out on hotel taxes, which we otherwise would be capturing from Holiday Inn, for instance. The town does not have any bona fide bed and breakfasts where Andover does. I think that that would be a very unique feature to have in town. I think there's maybe a counter argument here that, we're discussing this, and as you noted, we only have a very limited supply of these in existence right now. So it's not as if the hotel market has driven an abundance of Airbnbs in Newton. And even in the surrounding communities, there really aren't many of them. I saw Bruce Scruton on the list before. Maybe we'll have, an increase in the number of these once the Herald article gets run that we're discussing. But, as of right now, the market has sort of self-regulated that people don't exist. And maybe because of the difficulty that's potentially existing in this and trying to carve out definitions as to what is what, maybe until it does creep up a little bit, we proceed with the status quo, because I'm just looking at this and figuring like, this is gonna be really difficult to try to define, I think.
So there are 107 Airbnbs available right now to include Andover, Stillwater, Frieden, Newton, Swartzwood. So I know that's a big area to cover, and yes, a lot of them are, advertising lake views and all that kind of stuff. But I hear what you're saying. I mean, and then again, that's why I made the comment where we might start with one and then in a year have to update the ordinance because of.
And on the flip side of it, you absolutely do have the safety argument, because if people are going to go about this the right way, you do have the ability to, ensure safety standards, you have a contact, and sometimes it's really difficult, especially from the police department's level, to figure out who's responsible for that property, especially if they're an absentee landlord. But you also open the door here for increased commercial usage, like buying short, you have investors come into the town, they purchase single family residences. They now are absentee, but they're the ones operating this seemingly single family house that's now really a short-term rental. This is a difficult one.
Sandy or Michelle, other thoughts? JP, are you done? I'm sorry for now.
For the moment.
Okay.
yeah.
Bit more bubbles. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we're gonna need to do something because we have several very old homes, Miriam House being one. Don't know what's going on with that at this point in time. But someone could come in, purchase that and decide to make it into a Airbnb. Or a multiple Airbnb, because that's a very large home, an estate.
So I'm sorry, can I ask a question off of that really quickly?
Yeah, go right ahead.
So we keep referring to like the commercial names Airbnb or Vrbo. Would we have the same temperament if we were just talking about a conventional bed and breakfast? Like if someone said the Merriam House bed and breakfast? Or are we concerned because of the negative association or the negative sentiment that some Airbnbs have had in other municipalities? Because from my perspective, I think that this town really could use some legitimate bona fide bed and breakfast. I think it'd be a really neat addition to the town.
So Jessica, is a bed and breakfast categorized
Sorry,
as a
cut you off.
hotel?
They're usually their own use. I think they're permitted in some of the zones. They're just less and less, I guess it seems like there are fewer and fewer people who want to run those. So there seems to be fewer and fewer of those of bed and breakfasts around that I see, and that more people are doing. The Airbnb type is a little more hands-off, like they don't have to live there and serve breakfast to people or have
Yeah.
someone staying there.
So let me
it just seems to be more.
Let me re-ask it this way. What is the state view of bed and breakfast as? Is it a hotel? Is it a?
That's more like
boarding
a-
house? Is it a?
It's more like a business.
So that's interesting because it's still lodging.
Right, and this is.
It's more of a lodging situation. So Airbnbs are different because someone's coming, like a family comes and uses the house for a couple days. You know, and they're just living there as a single family residence. If you're running a bed and breakfast, it's kind of like you're running a mini hotel in your house. You know, where people are staying in the rooms, they're using the main room together, they get the breakfast in the morning, you know, but it's a little,
You offer breakfast though.
what's that?
Some Airbnbs do come with breakfast.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of do that with the renting the single room. But I think more and more what I see is mainly you get the whole house or a whole unit or like accessory apartment. You know, but it's more of you're getting a whole unit, you're not sharing it with somebody. So it's blurred a lot more because of these different platforms, I think, than it used to be. Where you had a bed and breakfast, you had a bed and breakfast, you know, now it's like kind of all different levels.
And maybe to a degree, we're all, I mean, in my head, I'm kind of drawing a parallel here, maybe I'm mistaking the conversation, but. You know, on one hand, yes, we potentially have a short-term rental boarding house, unauthorized occupancy kind of situation going on, but I think we also are very distinctly talking about the more commercial platform type of rental units. And I don't know if these conversations should be separate, should be the same, but I'm wondering if maybe we're looking at this in two separate pathways, which shouldn't be.
And are we trying to solve two problems?
Right, because, you know, I think there definitely is a legitimate issue in the municipality dealing with overcrowding of units, you know, excess occupancy. But that's not really what happens with your commercial, you know, insert your platform name here, bed and breakfast, renting a single room for a night or 2 nights for a wedding kind of deal. I think these are two totally separate issues, but yes, if you permit one, regulate this, you define things, then yes, this could be a slippery slope and people could abuse that terminology. Where I think maybe, you know, approaching this initially with a kind of a status quo approach, dealing with the extant problem that we have, figuring that out, and then we take a step back and then try to regulate the commercial aspect of this.
So the state of New Jersey actually issues a bed and breakfast license. And in order to meet the eligibility for a bed and breakfast license, there's certain criteria you have to meet, and municipalities may be limited to the number of bed and breakfast licenses that they could get from the state. So it is also handled under DCA. Licensing similar to hotels, motels, and boarding houses.
Right.
So it's interesting. So again, delineating the difference between a boarding house and a short-term rental. I'm gonna stop saying Airbnb and Vrbo, but short-term rental.
If we put this off to go chase after the boogeyman, that we don't really have a way to. But we don't have a way to track them down. We don't have a way to, at this point, to even correct that problem. We don't even know where they all are. But we could take care of this issue so that it doesn't become a new problem on top of that issue.
Of our current.
And now we'll know where these units are. We'll be able to track them. We'll be registered.
Would they? Because we have the same issue with the current apartments that we don't have our inventory in that. So what my point is, like,
So we shouldn't do it because there's bad apples that.
well, no, we have a problem with landlords not registering now. So if we can figure out how to address that problem and solve it, and now we have the ability to do that. If we approach it, the different structure. Because we have a rental registration, we're pretty much, you know, entertaining the idea of creating the same thing for this type of purpose. We have that system functionally in place already, and it's not effective, it's not efficient, it's not enforced properly. So figure this out, because we functionally have the same thing, we're just redefining.
Yeah, and JP and I have had this conversation because we just had this whole assessment done, right? Where they literally have gone door to door, and for 25% of the properties who have gone that door twice. It would be interesting to say, 20 Duma was a single family home when it was built, and then all of a sudden, when the reval and reassessment was done, it appears to be a 3-family home. Okay, at some point it changed, right? It's not registered. Like, there's gotta be, I mean, I know it's huge, but there's gotta be a way to overlay the data,
Right.
to
And I would say
figure out.
the visibility of this, especially if you're using a commercial platform, makes it so much easier for us to identify that this exists, because how else would people know that these Airbnbs are there or these short-term rentals are there? Whereas everything that we have right now is functionally unknown. I think that system ends up being a lot easier to regulate because it's known and visible and we can search it very easily.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to over-regulate or be big business, but I'm just trying to also make sure that we know what's going on in the town to protect first responders, to protect the residents and have safety issues and inspections and all that, because we know that we have buildings in town now that are not safe.
I think you're mixing the issues though. I think to John Paul's point, like Terry can speak to the plan of how we're going to work on the landlords this summer, right? We're gonna try to rattle the cage a little bit. Right now, I'm working with Eric's office because legislation says that for the CFCs, it needs to be a fire official. Jeff Schiffner's not a fire official. So now I'm trying to figure out if I'm keeping staffing as is or if I'm modifying that, which if you look at these ordinances, there's a fire
There
prevention
is.
component. We don't have a fire prevention bureau. So now I'm including either the sheriff, so, the county, or I'm going to include Hardiston, and this is just my quick 2 cents for what is going on right now. There might be some level of overreach, maybe to John Paul's point, we need to kind of get our house in order on the landlords, which is a much bigger issue than 3 people that want to do an Airbnb in the town of Newton right now. I'm just, it's up to you guys, but this will be a pretty complicated, the definitions, is it gonna go in code enforcement with Mike Monaco? He's part-time. Jeff works a few hours a week. Is it gonna go in zoning? Is it gonna go? She'll hate me saying this, the clerk's office, right? I mean, because you got the landlord registration, like mechanically, this is an administrative nightmare potentially for a very small universe. So if you want us to work on the landlords, right, Terry can walk you through what we're gonna do this summer. If you believe there's certain properties that might be abusing their zoning or their, certificates of occupancy, that to me is a separate issue, but I think there's a lot of issues that are going on the table, which is gonna make this a nightmare, other than saying,
disagree.
hey, we want people to come to visit the town, stay a couple nights, go to a show and go to dinner and, and like I said, we'll do whatever you want us to do, but Jessica, priority obviously right now is the affordable housing. We have the community energy plan. We have the sustainable New Jersey. So this is going to be down the pike because she's already got multiple projects in the queue. But I don't know, maybe Terry just walk through what we're going to do this summer with the landlords because I know, yeah, just because.
Well, we do have a lot of properties that are not registered, and it's hard to determine, like you've said, whether they're single family homes or they are rentals. So I'm proposing hiring somebody that's gonna, similar to what a dog census was, they would go door to door. They would find the person home. Are you the owner or do you rent? And if they rent, they're supposed to have a lead paint inspection, and that's supposed to be attached to their lease. So this is a way of determining, first of all, whether they're landlords or not, whether they should be registered and whether they've done the proper inspections. Because I do have a lot of landlords that have registered, but they haven't done the lead-based paint inspection. So or they haven't given me the insurance. There's so many different things that are required for that it's very hard to keep up with it. So that's, like I said, I would like to hire somebody that would go door to door and find out and then keep track of it. And then we can send out letters and then maybe enforce it a little bit better. That's my plan for the summer.
Is there any way to utilize the data that's been given to us? And I think JP just looked it up based on his
Separate
face,
thing, keep
something,
going.
okay. Is to utilize the data that was just obtained through the assessment.
that's another thing. See, like, and we ran into this with a couple of people. The appraisers go out and they inspect the house, but they don't have the history of the house. We had one person that the appraiser was like, okay, this is a 3-family, but it was never approved as a 3-family.
That's my point.
Right, so then Kerry had to fight with them and, you know, they give Kerry a hard time, but it was illegally changed years ago in between assessments or whatever appraisals. And yeah, when they bought the house, they were told it was a 3-family, but it's not an approved 3-family.
But to me, that's the low hanging fruit. Like we have, we have real time information from the assessment and then we have historical data. I mean, I feel like that's. Maybe it's an intern project for the summer, but putting the two together and say there should be a way to raise a red flag on these 78 properties that were. One use, and then through the assessment was determined that they were a different use.
I mean, I don't know how that, they would incorporate that because they're not on the computer that way.
Well, that and when they went out to do the reassessment, were they focusing on that,
Right.
you
And-
know, or were they focusing on? You know, like, is it hard sometimes to tell, right? Like. To Matt and JP, when you guys go on, you know, an EMS call, like, oh, what door am I supposed to go to? You know, at a particular residence. And you picked the wrong one because you didn't know that that was a separate apartment or something. You know,
They're already required to register. We did this already. Ordinance 2022-30, which creates the landlord registration platform, requires any single-family residence, apartment, studio, condominium, or any other dwelling designed to be occupied by one or more persons and rented, leased, or otherwise offered for use by other than the owner for one or more nights in a calendar year. Your short-term rental commercial platforms already required to register with us. Are they?
I just choose landlords as landlords.
Right. so
Like
but-
I said,
but-
so,
by our-
but I know there's like one person in particular that wants to switch to an Airbnb,
So by our definition,
but she would still have to register.
that is a residential rental unit
Mhm.
and your Airbnb has to comply with this because we've defined that they have to register annually. We're already doing it. We're already theoretically.
We're already there.
So then do we just need to add language to that? Does that just need to be amended?
To, it's already saying. if
already
you're-
said
I'm
if
looking
you're
at
single-family
Jessica.
residence, Apartment, studio.
Yeah, you could.
It's just the lead-based
Get the word
paint is
out.
only for, is not for short-term rentals. The lead-based paint inspection.
You have to register, you have to pay your or your rental registration fee to us as it is if you're operating an Airbnb for whatever. By the ordinance.
You have to amend the ordinance declaring what it is.
That's why I was just looking at Jessica
Yeah.
to see what her suggestion would be on that.
I mean, unless you want to redefine what the residential rental unit is, but I think it's pretty comprehensive. It's single family residence, apartment, studio, condominium, or any other dwelling designed to be occupied by one or more persons. And rented, leased, or otherwise offered for use by other than the owner for one or more nights in a calendar year. I think that's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, you would just need to get the word out. I think that that's included.
That's
This falls back into exactly what we're trying to solve on the other.
like when you're going out there door to door, by the way, if you choose to do this, there's some important.
You need
information
to, you need to register as a landlord. Maybe you don't know that, you know?
Right.
Yeah,
Find
you
the
could do that.
Census of Airbnb and see who's popping up and go rent them.
So,
station shifts.
Right.
yeah, right, well, so then I guess. What we need to do is look at the existing ordinance, Jessica,
Okay.
Yeah, we need to look at that, compare it to the other ones.
to compare to the samples
So
of
it's-
West Milford.
And I don't wanna compare us to the lake communities. I'm curious what like a Flemington, like the county seats, Morristown,
Morrison.
you know what I mean? Like Somerville,
Yeah.
those kinds of towns.
Okay.
Hackettstown, yeah, I'm curious how they would.
More of a similar type of town. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's
That'll be
chapter
pretty cool.
213, section 27.
213 section.
All right, so,
That's the list of definitions.
all right, so we'll compare that. We'll look at those other towns.
And Morristown addressed this in 2019.
Morristown.
213 is a property maintenance chapter, but that's where you define the residential rental unit has the owner registration.
All right. Did Dover ever deal with this, Tom, in your time there? I was just,
Dover?
I'm just
No.
curious.
Oh, everything in Dover.
Honestly, I, when I was down at my clerk's conference, I asked Stanhope how they're,
Yeah.
we don't do anything. I'm like, what? Like, they don't even require the lead-based paint and all that kind of, I'm like, okay. Because no one's complained so far.
But I also think that a couple of those municipalities that were just mentioned don't have the rental and the non-owner occupied and the,
How many seats do?
no, I know, but I mean, like, Byram's doesn't have the same.
No.
No, that's Stanhope is a little
Stanhope
different, yeah.
is either.
Seats would be good to
Right.
last. The Morristones.
Mhm.
Yeah, 50% rental,
Hackettstones,
50%
all
rental.
would be-
Right.
Right.
That's exactly it.
You could also ask like Sparta and West Milford, like, you guys restricted this, or at least Sparta did.
Sparta, yeah.
What was the?
Basis.
What was their rationale?
What brought you to this point? Was it just like a?
Why
Well, that's
didn't they want
fascinating because
to?
they have
Why
like
did Sparta
Mohawk. I
want
mean, wait, that's what I was.
They have 10.
You think they would?
They even looked at it already?
I
Yeah,
think
have
they
a-
just, people were bothered by having them in their neighborhoods.
Yeah.
It's just a-
Nuisance.
Not in my backyard.
But they have them. The shelter set it up.
Optics type of thing.
Yeah.
They had some around the wedding rentals, like,
Yeah.
is that Rock?
Rock Oak Lodge
Yeah,
or whatever it is.
Yeah.
there were some around that lake.
Tomahawk.
And they
Wing.
wanted to- They wanted to get rid of them, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah, right.
Oh, no, Sparta definitely has Airbnbs. I'm looking at them. They have a lot.
All right, we'll do some analysis on the county seats and a few other towns. So.
Okay.
All right,
well,
thanks, Judge.
All right.
Ongoing
Thank you,
discussion.
Jessica.
Thank you.
Working.
All right, so we are going to then move on to item 9, ordinances. We have a second reading and public hearing on ordinance 2025-7. An ordinance to amend, revise, and supplement chapter 100 of the town code of the town of Newton entitled Fees and Costs, most notably section 100-13 animals and section 100-24 miscellaneous fees and charges. Let's open that to the public. Anybody wishing to comment on this ordinance?
Well, online. Dr. McCosh.
Okay, Tom, go ahead with that.
Good evening, Ludmila Mekasha. So I apologize in advance. I am not too much familiar about the exactly the amount of fees and the charges for the animals. I am for the paying some fees out there as a pet owner myself. I do understand I pay a fee for my dog and also for my cat. But if your plan it is to increase that fee, I do not find that reasonable. So again, I don't know what's going on about these fees. I agree with that, but again, it's to a certain amount, not, I mean, to overwhelm the residents with excessive, and especially let's say for the cat, that if the cat is indoor, even when you put that ordinance, sometimes some years, I remember that, I don't know how many years ago it was, I found it a little unreasonable for an indoor cat to pay a fee. Again, I'm hoping this is not going to be some increase on the fees because I do not find that right. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else, Tom, wanting to?
No, doesn't look like.
Okay, seeing no one else, we'll close the hearing to the public and do I have a motion to act on the ordinance. And Tom, did you have anything else to add to this?
No.
Okay, we have a motion to act on the ordinance.
I will make a motion to act on ordinance 2025-7.
Do I have a second?
I will second the motion.
I have a motion by Councilwoman Teets and a second by Councilwoman Diglio to move ordinance 2025-7. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Coos,
Yes?
Mr. Dixon,
Yes.
Mrs. Diglio,
Yes.
Mrs. Teets,
Yes.
Mayor LaFois.
Yes. Next, we have ordinance 2025-8. This is an ordinance to amend, revise, and supplement chapter 258 stormwater control in the code of the town of Newton. Let's open that to the public. No comments in the council chambers. Tom, any online?
No.
All right, seeing none, we will close the hearing to the public. Do I have a motion to act on the ordinance?
I'll make a motion to act on ordinance 2025-8.
I'll second.
A motion by Deputy Mayor Dixon, a second by Councilwoman Teets. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Coos,
Yes.
Mr. Dixon,
Yes.
Mrs. Diglio,
Yes.
Mrs. Teets,
Yes.
Mayor LaFois.
Yes. All right, we have introduction of ordinance 2025-9. This is an ordinance to amend, revise, and supplement chapter 307 of the Town Code of the Town of Newton entitled Vehicles and Traffic. Most notably Article 3, Traffic Regulations, Section 307-12, One-Way Streets, and Article 11, Schedules, Section 307-55, Schedule 6, One-Way Streets. Tom, can you please explain this, describe it?
Yeah, that was a request from one of the residents about Linwood Annex, if it should be one way. The engineer concurred with that, so that's the ordinance you see before you.
And many of us were out at the dedication ceremony for the
Yes.
crosswalks there and
Saw the issue.
saw the issue and talked to many of the residents in the area about this. Okay, so this is a motion to introduce. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to introduce ordinance 2025-9.
And I will second.
Right, I have a motion by Deputy Mayor Dixon and a second by Councilwoman Teets. A roll call, please.
Mr. Coos,
Yes.
Mr. Dixon,
Yes.
Mrs. Diglio,
Yes.
Mrs. Teets,
Yes.
Mayor LaFois.
Yes, so the public hearing on ordinance 2025-9 will be held on Monday, April 28th, 2025 at 7:00 PM or as soon thereafter as the matter may be heard during the regular course of business on the agenda. All right, we're going to move to the consent agenda. All items listed with an asterisk are considered to be routine and non-controversial by the town council and will be approved by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence on the agenda. Mr. Russo, can you run through the resolutions?
Sure. 120 is a change order number 2, reduction $3,743.40. 121 accepts Firehouse 1 project as final and complete. 122, purchase of propane gas through state contract. 123 is a contract with Suburban Consulting for Morris Lake Chem Room and SCADA. 124 is a contract with Suburban for Morris Lake Water Treatment Plant Clearwell and High Street Water Storage Cleaning, Tank Cleaning. 125, credits to water sewer. 126, disclosure contract Convergent. 127, insertion of a special item of revenue, chapter 159, recycling tonnage grant, 89,148.26. 128, contract with Suburban Consulting for Sparta Avenue Pump Station, topographic survey and permitting. 129, refund of redemption for 92 Madison. 130, contract with PSNS for wastewater treatment plant generator and bills and vouchers. And we have one fire department application off consent.
Are there any items for discussion on the consent agenda or resolutions that need to be removed for discussion? All right, seeing none, can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second?
I will second the motion.
All right, I have a motion by Deputy Mayor Dixon and a second by Councilwoman Diglio. Roll call, please.
Mr. Coos,
Abstaining from checks 12891 and 12926. Yes, I believe.
is that 926, did you say? Mr. Dixon,
Yes.
Mrs. Diglio,
Yes.
Mrs. Teets,
I will abstain from the application.
I think they're doing that as
Or
separate.
separate.
Oh, is it? Okay, sorry. I thought we rolled it all together. So yes, I'm good. Thank you.
Mayor LaFois.
Yes. Okay, so now we'll move on to applications. We have an application for membership into the Newton Fire Department as a regular member from Matthew Teets. Do I have a motion to approve the application?
I will make the motion to approve the application.
Second.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Councilwoman Diglio, a second by Deputy Mayor Dixon. A roll call, please.
Mr. Coos,
Yes.
Mr. Dixon,
Yes.
Mrs. Diglio,
Yes.
Mrs. Teets,
Abstain.
Mayor LaFois.
Yes. Yay, Matt. Matthew. Item number 12 on the agenda is an appointment. This is an appointment, renewal of Mark Fedorczyk to the Newton Housing Authority. So that's just on the agenda. Okay, so at this point in time, we will reopen the meeting to the public. If you'd like to make a statement, please state your name and spell your last name for the record. You have 3 minutes. And it looks like we have no one in person, but we have Ludmilla Makaj online, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, good evening again. Do you hear me?
yes.
Okay, good. Two things. First, I was wondering if I can get a copy of the discussion done by the Jessica Caldwell and Associates in regards to the short-term rentals and affordable housing. I'd like to read that since I couldn't capture everything here. And based on what she said, I'd like to do a little comment about that. As a very dear friend of mine, very often she uses this and says the government needs to get out of the people business. I hope you understand what does this means. By doing so, you aligns with the principles of called laissez-faire economics. So small businesses, owners like myself, for example, but not just myself, but even there are simple residents out there that like to rent a short terms. So then if there is a little income out there, why not to pay for, already we know our town, it is classical about raising every year the taxes. So we advocate for a minimal government intervention in the economy, basically. And and I do understand because you discussed that about the code of the CO, like if you have a short rentals, you need to register like a regular lord and tenant, whatever, that you need to register your property if you are a rental out there. But to do something like, for example, every year fire inspection, etc., one based on the code, it is a 10-year when you do those changements. I find this very unnecessary. But again, I'd like to get a copy of that preparation. So then next time I'll be able, I'm prepared to give my more inputs and challenging out there. But I'd like also to say something to the clerk.
1 minute left.
1 minute left. Okay, Mrs. Terry, that she said, I find it very premature to say that you'll like to hire someone when we already know the expenses in this town to knock on the doors of the people and asking how it is that. And I think you are opening some kind of dangerous path out there, at least with the last proposal from this deputy manager here. I don't know, but I found that for the short term, it is people who rent not myself, because I'm a long term, but I may look into that. People with a short term, I'm not looking to get a lot of money there. And if they are with Airbnb, for those who knows what is Airbnb, they are well maintained. They are well, they are going to maintain their property because they are subject to the good reviews or the bad reviews. So I find it a little too
Time
much
is up.
concerning. Of course it is. So again, I advocate for minimal government.
Tom, any other comments? Okay. So just to be clear, the discussion tonight was about short-term rentals, but we had multiple conversations around rentals in general. And what we do know is that we have an ordinance that says if you have a rental property, it must be registered with the town clerk, and all associated responsibilities, whether it's lead-based paint, safety considerations, fire inspections, all of those types of requirements are already in place in town. What we also recognize, however, is that we have several properties that are not registered and not in compliance with the existing ordinances. And so we had multiple conversations kind of under the auspice of one topic, but to be continued. All right.
Can you get a copy of Justice?
Okay, and for Mrs. Makaj, town manager has just asked the clerk to get the information that you requested. All right, additional council and manager comments, Mr. Russo. Mr. Coos.
I just circle back to the annual fees. Dr. Nakaj did ask a question about what those fees were, and if any one of those were changing. So we have a mix of changes in the animal fees. One item that's increasing, police escrow accounts increased $2 an hour for compensation, $1 an hour for the administrative fee. Most of the other fees that are included in that ordinance change, although the maximum dollar figure increases, it changes from a fixed amount to a range. So for instance, if there's a destruction or surrender of any dog or cat, previously it was a fixed $300 cost. Now it's not to exceed $350. So while the cost may potentially increase, it provides a range which was not there before, and allows actually for you know, a compassionate policy, if you will, in reducing that fee. That's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz. We actually had several conversations with regards to the adjustment of that ordinance. I think over 2 or 3 meetings. So yeah, 2 meetings. All right. Sandy. Councilwoman DeLeo.
I just forgot earlier when I was making comments that the Memorial Day Parade Committee met this past Friday. We'll be meeting again. Everyone has been given their assignments as to what they need to do. And we're in the process of taking applications and sponsors at this point in time. So we're on the move.
Okay. Councilwoman Teets.
I should have added when I went through my notes that the school board meeting is tomorrow night. And
Okay.
this always happens, that the council meeting is like the night before the school board meeting, and within the next 2 weeks, you know, Tap into Newton has covered most of the events and, you know, but I'll let you know after tomorrow night if there's anything to report back. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Dixon.
Just, we obviously aim to be business friendly up here, as we sit here and say that all the time. But at the same time, if you're sitting up here, you're also tasked with the general responsibilities of safety and well-being and quality of life for everybody in the town. So we have to take all of that into account. All
Well
that
said.
added.
Well said. Okay, I have nothing else to add at this time. Can I have a motion to adjourn at 9:20 p.m.?
I will make a motion to adjourn at 9:20 p.m.
I'll second.
All right, I have a motion by Councilwoman Teets and a second by Deputy Mayor Dixon. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.